So Rabbi Mordechai here, and we're just continuing this process of understanding manifestation. And in our first class, we talked about the idea of manifestation from the standpoint of looking at the structure of the universe that we're in and how things function, right? The overall structure of how things function, how things come into existence, and that parameters, right? To kind of like in the way, say like the 365 days out of a year, that overall structure, we went over that. But in the second class, we went into which should be done in those 365 days, right? So you have the landscape of manifestation and how manifestation, what is the structure that things are even manifested out of, right? And then from there, we went into the what manifestation actually is and is not, right? And then we built forward from there, right? And now we're going into the third class, which is about the system of man, right? Because now that we understand the structure of manifestation, meaning that we understand that the desires that we have are ultimately for God. And God gives us a vision inside of our heads, and He puts that vision inside of our heads, and that path that we have to go on to manifest that vision is what creates us and refines us and builds us into the person that Hashem wants us to become by giving us such a task. It's the changing on the task that God ultimately wants from us. And so here, now that we're at a stage of understanding God and understanding, that it's really about this transformational process. We talked about Adam in the last class and the duality of Adam before falling out versus after, the process of manifestation before Adam fell out of Gan Eden versus after, the process of how the secular world sees fulfillment from the standpoint of phases as we see it as more immediate, and being able to reconcile these things. But let's talk about Adam and how the Midrashim describe Adam, because this is a very important point, because in order for us to create solutions, we have to know the shorish. We have to know the origin. That's why many of the different people who claim to have information and claim to have insight, they really have to be questioned, because what is the basis of how they're telling me this particular reality or this particular truth, or giving me this particular direction, even if a person is successful, right? If they don't have a core understanding of the beginning and the truth, the reasons why they think they're successful may not even be accurate. Quick in our society, we're so quick to run to the person who's had success and this and that, but we don't realize that a lot of success is like happenstance. It happened, someone's at the right place, someone invested at the right time. It doesn't mean that they understand things. But us as Jews, regardless of whatever Parnassah Hashem puts into our life, which is decided on Rosh Hashanah, we still have an insight to the beginning of the origins of everything. And so, on Rosh Hashanah, this was the creation of man, right? So let's read a little bit about it. Let's read a little bit about the creation of man, because that's going to connect us to what we learned in our last class. Because our last class, we talked about the light that emanates in this world and the process of how this light comes to different dimensions and how this process of malchut and manifestation, these things happen. So now that we understand the system, how it works, and the structure that it's within, now we can understand the role of the individual, right? And so the Midrashim say like this. It says, on the last of the 6 days of creation, which was the first day of Tishri, Hashem was about to form man's body, okay? So at the end of the 6 days, God created man. But before He created man, we're about to learn how God assembled mankind. So now when you see every single person walking around, you see people walking around every day, do you ever ask yourself, like, how are human beings assembled? How are we put together? What is the process of manifestation of the core human being? And I guess you have Darwin and you have people who have theories on this, but again, what is the basis of where they're coming from? Are they coming from the basis of understanding that the human eye only sees 1% of reality, and there's a whole 99% of reality that's happening around us that we can't see with the human eye, that we don't have a measuring stick to even understand or comprehend outside of some very basic scientific eyes, other than, Kabbalah? Right? Kabbalah is the only thing that explains the dimensions and explain this influence and how this manifestation on earth and all these different things and how they happen. The only thing we have for that is the Kabbalah. It's the only thing that we have that explains those details. And we wouldn't even know that those details even exist, right? Science is just now figuring out, a couple years ago, that how the human eye actually functions, right? So we're hearing about the process of how man was created, right? And this is a huge, I can't even stress how big of a deal this is. The fact that we have the merit to hear the information of how human beings were assembled and not through some scientific lens of agenda and politics and all types of stuff. So it says like this, he said he collected earth from all parts of the world to shape his arms and his legs. And so I guess the arms and the legs there was earth. I guess man was made of earth, and this earth was took from different parts of the world, for the arms and the leg. Okay, obviously these things have very deep meanings as well. He took the earth from the land of Babel to create the trunk. I'm not sure what they mean by trunk, but I guess we could assume that he brought earth from Eretz Israel, the Holy Land, to create Adam's head, which is the most essential part of the human body, right? So this is how man was created. So the arms of man, the earth that was used to form the arms that we have right now, that earth that was formed into clay, and then that eventually turned into flesh, which is a whole process. That dynamic, that earth was took from different parts of the world for the arms and the legs. And then also here it says the earth took from right Babel, which is basically the Iraq, Mesopotamia, this place. From there it takes the trunk, right? So I'm thinking the lower part of and then it says the earth. He says the earth that it took for the head came from Eretz Israel, where I'm at right now, right? And so this is the whole dynamic, right? And it keeps going. He says Hashem placed earth, which that he collected on Har Bayit, like on the Har Maria, right? The place of the Mishbeach. And he took that earth from that part of the world and he mixed it with water from the oceans of the world, took all the oceans of the world, and from the clay from the water of the oceans of the world in the Har Maria, in the earth from Har Maria, he took from that and he molded the figure of a human being. So the whole structure, the silhouette of the human being was took from Hashem taking dirt, from taking earth, from the Mishbeach, from the Har Maria, from the top of where the Shekhinah is dwelling at. He took from that area and he formed the structure of Hashem. And he says, and from the clay molded, he molded the figure of a human being. He says, while the figure of Adam was still lying motionless on the ground. So it's like, sometimes you see like you see these like kids, and their parents, and they're at the beach, right? And then they have a person's laid down, and then they basically cover that person with sand, and they mold around and they build around the whole thing, and he's just there, right? He's just there, right? And it's the whole silhouette and the whole structure of a body. That's kind of like the visual that the Midrashim are giving us. And again, we're talking about the beginning, we're talking about manifestation, we're talking about the ability to manifest, we're talking about the ability to bring things into reality. And so this dynamic of understanding Adam and understanding the first man is understanding the essence of who we are and the essence of our relationship with Hashem, right? Because all of these different body parts, as we discussed in the last class, that there's 10 dimensions, 3 in the upper worlds and 7 below. And in the 7, the 6 of them are like the male reproductive organ, which is the entity of sharing. And then the last one, the seventh, which is called Malchut, is like the female reproductive organ, which is the receiver. But these are spiritual entities, right? And that spirituality of them becoming one and becoming close, becoming one and becoming close in creating this unification is the light that God is talking about. This is the light of Hashem wanting to come into this world, and then us being the vessels, being the kalim to receive this light. And through that unification, a tremendous light happens, right? So we're saying over here right now that we're talking about the dynamic of the human being. And so each of the body parts of the human being that connect are also connected to these aspects of light. So these 10 dimensions, you can find different body parts, right? The crown and the wisdom, keter chokmah, being and understanding. This could be the upper thinking. Then you have the arms, and you have the body, and you have the legs, and you have the feet, and everything represents something spiritually, right? And so the more we understand that we are a spiritual entity, and we were created through spirituality with thinking, with kavana, right? Then we could do it. And so they said, while the figure of Adam was lying motionless on the ground, Hashem unrolled his eyes, a vision of the future world. So this is before Adam has a soul inside of him. His body's completely molded. He completely built out. He has aspects of clay that are from all the different parts of the world. He's made by the water of all the seas combined. And that structure is there. The only thing that's missing is the life force of the Ruach. Right, this aspect of the spirit, the soul, the neshama, that's the only aspect that's missing. So right now, before Hashem breathes that spirit, that soul inside of him, then from there, we are understanding Adam. And he says he opens his eyes, and he says he opens these eyes of Adam as he's laying there motionless. And he says Adam in vision was able to see that the aspect of the intelligence that the before, like I guess before you could say like there's a full soul inside the body, there's still a brain, there's a heart, there's a whole structure. In that same way, before the soul came into the body of Adam, there was an aspect of intelligence. And so Hashem opened his eyes. And he opened his eyes, and Adam envisioned Noach. He saw all the Siddiqim of the future. He visualized Abraham. He saw all the Gerim. He saw Yitzhak. He saw all those that who would offer sacrifices. He saw Yaakov. He saw all the future Talmid Chacham, Moshe, and all the humble people, Aaron, the Kohanim, David. He just saw everybody. He saw all the righteous people. He saw all the future generations. He saw everything, right? And then Hashem says, and again, Hashem, this is before he gets a soul, and he says, Hashem says, to Adam, he says, did you see in all the Siddiqim, all these righteous people all these Siddiqim that will descend from you. And Adam was pleased. He saw all the righteous people. He saw all the people living and being this bright light in this world and keeping this world stabilized, right? Until the full manifestation of Mashiach reveals itself. And Mashiach, in essence, being a descendant as well, right? And so he saw that. He saw the future reality. And the muster behind it is that, in the beginning of man, in the beginning of man's existence, God gave him this experience of opening his eyes so he would be able to see how important it was for him to be successful, how important it was for him that even if he fell down to get back up, because there's so many future generations counting on Adam, the first man, right? And so this is the dynamic of man. This is the dynamic of Adam. And he says before imbuing, so this is the biggest thing. Everyone knows how Hashem breathed the soul into Adam, right? But there's a thinking process behind it. Right? And that thinking process behind it is so incredibly important, right? It's so incredibly important because that thinking process behind it allows us to understand the relevancy and the depth around why things are the way that they are. So it says before imbuing Adam with life, giving him a soul. This was the contemplation. Should I give him life through his mouth? And then Hashem said, no, I can't do that. for, eventually his mouth could speak Lashon Hara? Should I blow a soul into his body through his eyes? No, he blinks with them for potentially for evil purposes. Neither his ears a good conduit for the soul to enter because he allows them to hear Lashon Hara. I would choose a more suitable opening, his nostrils. Just as the nostrils expel pollution from the air, so do the tzaddikim remove themselves from the foul odor smelling sins and cling to the sweet scents of the Torah. So this is the dynamic. This is the dynamic, and it goes into the lashon. It goes into the lashon. It says, when discussing the creation of Adam, the Torah spells the word v'yetzer. Yeah, and he says he created. Because it's with a W. That's why I'm looking. I'm like, wait, why is this saying that? Veyatzer, right? Veyatzer, that's the word. He created, right? But when it says it about Adam in Bereshit 2:7, it says it in contrast to the creation of man, which only has it for one yud. It says yetzer with one yud, right? Veyatzer, right? And so the dynamic of Veyetzer here is with one yud, right? So the one Veyetzer with as it relates to man has two yuds, and as it relates to animals is one yud. Therefore, the Torah indicates that Adam's creation was not merely physical, but Hashem created him with a dual nature. What is this dual nature? So what's this dual nature? Although the body was a product of dust, he possessed an eternal soul. So a man was created with this duality, right? We have to understand who we are. We have to understand who we are. We have to understand why we are the way that we are and why we function the way that we function, because this is the clarity that we need in order to begin this process of receiving this light that God is trying to reveal to us all the time. And we need to understand our nature to be able to create the opening so we can receive this energy that allows us to connect to God at every stage of our life. Meaning at every stage of our life is a different stage of manifestation. We're not waiting to the end of the sugya in order to be able to receive the fulfillment. And in fact, I need every single bit of light on my journey, because every single bit of light allows me to transform myself, because the journey itself is where my transformation is, where the fulfillment comes from. The dreams that Hashem gave me allowed me to now go on this path that allows me to mature and to contour and to transform my soul, right? And so by doing that, I'm going to be able to achieve the purpose of why I was here, which is the correction of the soul. This is why we were here. This is why we have dreams. This is why we went over the structure. This is why we went into the individual expression of this manifestation. We need to understand manifestation, because manifestation allows us to complete the mission of why we're here. So to understand this, we have to understand who we are. Right. And now we're learning that man was created with a dual nature. Although his body was produced of dust and clay, dirt, he possessed a soul. So that's a duality of man. There's this physical, earthly side of us, and there's a spiritual soul. He was created with the capacity to live in two worlds. In this world, this physical world, and the spiritual world, the 1% reality and the 99% reality. Adam was given inclinations which were diametrically opposed to each other, right? One of our natures is drawing us through good, right? Like they said, anytime Rivka would walk by a place of holiness, Yaakov would get excited. Anytime it went past a place of Avodah Esav would get excited. So that aspect of Esav and Yaakov was something that we could internalize within ourselves and say that dual nature exists within me. The Esav exists, and there's a Yaakov. The Yaakov wants only holiness, and there's a part of me that's caught into this physical world. So it says even Adam's physical creation was twofold. So they're saying the first original man was man and female in one body. In the front was a man, but attached to him in the back was a woman. And maybe some people still feel that way now, but the point is just saying that this is the dynamic, right? This is the dynamic. Man, your nature, our natural nature is duality. That's our natural nature. This is the midrash. The midrash is bringing out this idea of 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 of, of this duality, right? This duality. Now let's go even further into this duality, right? He said Adam was Hashem's handiwork and therefore physically perfect, right? He came into the world already circumcised, right? He was perfect. His height, right, before his sin was so great, he could reach the heavens. So he's standing on earth, he could reach the heavens, way bigger than Shaquille O'Neal. And he filled the world too. His beauty was so radiant that even after his death, the lowest part of his body darkened the sun. His face shone, his strength was enormous. So Adam, before the fall, when he was in a state of complete manifestation, his physical abilities were beyond imagination, were beyond what we even could conceive right now, right? And he was a powerful entity. And he had enormous strength. You think about the generation after, the generation of Noah and how strong they were. And they were these giants and they had these huge abilities. So this was a digression from Adam. Adam was greater than them by a zillion, right? And so this is what Adam is expressing. This is what's going through this dynamic is Adam before this ability. And it's just as soon as Adam was created, listen to this. As soon as Adam was created, the angels overcame by his greatness and holiness, bowed to him and wanted to sing his praises, right? And then so what did Hashem do? This is to show you how great and overbearing greatness Adam was in terms of his creation. He said it was only when Hashem made Adam fall asleep that he realized that they have erred, he was only a human, right? So like we take that for granted. We think like, oh, well, Adam, he just kind of like randomly went to sleep. He randomly went to sleep and, he was tired and he woke up and his wife was there. And then now the Midrash gives us the story that no, when Adam was created, that the whole universe, all the angels were enamored and they were singing praises. And they were, like you see these concerts, right? You see these concerts and you have a guy like Drake, he just performed in New York, right? I see the highlights, I keep in touch with the news. And so Drake, Drake, he's performing, he's performing at the Apollo in New York, and you just have these girls there and they're just screaming and crying and saying every word and falling. And if you go back in time, even when Michael Jackson was around, you had people that were fainting in the crowd and they had to be carried away. And it was this dramatic scene. It was this whole thing, right? So you could imagine a taste of that times a zillion with the angels giving this honor to Adam, right? And this honor to Adam that they were giving was like so intense that Hashem wanted to show them that Adam was just a man, so he put him to sleep. Why? Because Hashem never sleeps. That's an important factor. When we're thinking about this creative universe and you're thinking about what's in front of us and what we're experiencing and what we're dealing with, one has to really accept that Hashem never sleeps. Hashem is always functioning. Hashem's always providing. He's always giving. He's always sharing. And so what does he do after he puts him to sleep? He creates a spouse. Hashem has no spouse. Right? Hashem is omnipresent. He's everything. So now the angels understand this. But now what did we learn about man? We learned that man was assembled with a lot of thought and a lot of detail. Even the soul of man, even the soul of man was a process. It wasn't just something that just happened, through the nostrils, right? This is the idea, is to understand that everything has a dimension, everything's put together, everything is here for our ultimate success, even the way our body is formed. And we also learn that man has a dual nature. We have this aspect of earthliness by our physical self, and then we have this aspect of spirit, which is our neshama. And so these are two different entities. These are two completely different entities. These entities are functioning completely different, but cannot function without each other, right? This is what we're saying. This is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the idea of the core nature of who you are, according to the Torah, not according to science, not according to some guru, according to the Torah, according to the sages, according to the oldest wisdom that have kept the only empire, the only nation alive since pretty much the beginning of time to now. And when we say beginning of time, we're talking about the consciousness of Adam Rishon, the consciousness of Noah, the consciousness of Shane and Aver, the consciousness of Abraham. This consciousness is the original consciousness that was given to mankind. And so we're seeing through this consciousness, we're learning through this information, the original system of how we were created as human beings. And so we were created with a dual nature. And so this dual nature is understanding that we were created with the dual nature is the beginning of everything. This is the beginning of not judging yourself. This is the beginning of forgiving yourself. This is the beginning of not having anxiety. This is the beginning of being able to not have any limitations. This is the beginning of everything. It's us knowing that we live in a world of duality of perception. We live in a world of the duality of desire. And we live in the world of duality of self. We have different dynamics in us. This is how we are made. And everyone is made in a specific way, right? Everyone is made in a specific way. In a specific way that they're made allows them to reflect that unique light that we talked about in the last class. Reflecting that unique light that only your vessel, that unique prism, that only your vessel, that unique combination of light reflecting from your vessel that comes down into this world, and you reflect it. That light that we're speaking of, this light comes from the understanding of my personal duality. Everyone has a personal duality, right? Everybody has a personal duality. And the more that we understand our personal duality, what makes us the dualities that we have inside of us, the more powerful we are, because now we're connecting to ourselves in our original state. We're connecting to ourselves in our original state. So therefore, this duality that I have within myself now allows me to connect to the ultimate version of myself, which is the original man inside of the Garden of Eden before he fell out. Because this is how man was created in its original inception. This is who you are. It's not that we were created with flaws. This is the language of the secular world. We were created with duality. The whole notion of being graded on the report card, it does not work. Because everyone has a duality. Everyone's going to have a specific, unique way of engaging with the world. Everyone's going to have a unique way of making mistakes. This is the way of the world. And so now that we understand that we have a duality, Now this is the beginning of diving into the mechanism of how we receive light, because there's certain things that allow us to connect to the positive aspects, and then there's an aspect to us that connects to the negative aspects. We just learned this out. This is the duality. This is the duality of man. That part of us is inclined to go to the holiness, like Yaakov, and there's a part of us that's inclined to negativity. This is who we are. But it doesn't make us negative. You understand? When I say negativity, I'm saying the desires that don't give us the full fulfillment. It only gives us partial, right? The partial could be just pleasure, but it doesn't give us the spiritual connection, right? It's like a person who eats all the food, would never sing a bracha over anything. Maybe he got fat, he ate a lot, but he never received the fulfillment of eating and honoring God, the source of the food. So this is where we're at now. And so the next class we're going to go into this detail of who we are in this duality and how this duality functions. And what do we do about this duality? And so, and